He wasn't supposed to open that door. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Somewhere warm, or somewhere that still remembers the cold? It's just past 2:13 a.m. when Daniel Hayes hears the sound. Not loud, not urgent, just a soft, steady scrape against old wood, like something patient enough to wait years finally deciding it's time. The house is colder than he remembers. Not the kind of cold a thermostat fixes, but the kind that settles into the bones of the walls, into the floorboards that creak under every step like they're whispering names no one says anymore. He stands in the hallway in his socks, breath faint in the air, staring toward the sound. Ranger is already there. The German shepherd doesn't bark, doesn't move much at all, just sits in front of the wall behind the old bookshelf, head slightly tilted, one paw lifted as if mid-thought. His amber eyes flick once toward Daniel, then back to the wood. Waiting. Daniel rubs a hand over his face, rough stubble catching against his palm. He didn't come here for this. He came to sell the house. Sign papers. Pack what's left. Leave before Christmas morning could remind him of everything that used to be here. The realtor said the place would go fast. Quiet neighborhood. Good bones. Just needed a little work. She didn't know about the silence. The kind that presses in on your ears until you start hearing things that may or may not be real. Ranger scratches again. Slow. Deliberate. Not frantic. Not like a dog chasing something behind a wall. More like he already knows what's there. Daniel exhales, long and tired. There's nothing there, buddy. He mutters, voice low, careful not to wake memories that feel too close to the surface. But Ranger doesn't move. Doesn't even look back this time. Just presses his nose closer to the seam between the boards. The air shifts. It's subtle. A draft that shouldn't exist, slipping through the hallway and brushing against Daniel's bare ankles. He freezes. The house hasn't had airflow like that in years. He steps closer, each footfall soft against the worn hardwood. The scent changes too. Faint. Dust and something older. Metal, maybe. Or paper that's been sealed away too long. Ranger lets out a quiet breath, almost a hum, and taps the wall once more with his paw. Not a scratch this time. A signal. Daniel reaches out. His knuckles hover for a second before touching the wood. He knocks. Once. The sound that comes back isn't solid. It echoes. Hollow. His brow tightens. He knocks again, harder this time. Same sound. Something behind it. Something that shouldn't be there. Ranger finally looks up at him, and in that moment, there's something in the dog's eyes that doesn't feel like instinct. It feels like memory. Like recognition. Daniel swallows, throat dry. Okay, he whispers, though he's not sure who he's answering. He grips the edge of the bookshelf, muscles tensing as he pulls. It resists at first, then shifts with a low groan, dust drifting down in thin, silent lines. Behind it, the wall isn't a wall. It's a door. Old. Seemed nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. The handle is small, worn smooth with time, as if someone once used it often, and then stopped. The air coming from the cracks is colder now. Not sharp, just deep, like it's been waiting. Ranger steps back, giving him space, but his eyes never leave the door. Daniel's hand hovers over the handle. His pulse is louder than the house. For a second, he thinks about walking away, about pretending he never heard anything, about selling the place exactly as it is and letting whatever's behind that door stay buried where it's been for decades. But the cold brushes his skin again. And Ranger sits. Still. Certain. Like a soldier waiting for a command that's already been given. Daniel closes his eyes for half a breath. Then he grips the handle. And slowly he turns it. The hinge does not scream. It exhales. Slow. Heavy. Like something waking up after a long, patient sleep. The door opens just enough for the darkness inside to breathe out into the hallway. And the temperature drops another few degrees, cold settling around Daniel's wrists, as if the air itself is weight. He does not step in right away. He stands there, hands still on the handle, eyes adjusting to a black that feels thicker than night. Ranger moves first. Not rushing. Not cautious either. Just certain. The German shepherd lowers his head slightly and walks past Daniel's leg, crossing the threshold like he has done it before, like the room recognizes him even if Daniel does not. The floor. Inside is not wood. It is concrete. Smooth in some places, cracked in others, carrying a faint dust that shifts under Ranger's paws without sound. Daniel follows, slower, one hand brushing the wall to his right. The texture changes under his fingers. Not drywall. Not quite brick. Something older. Cooler. The smell deepens as he steps fully inside. Paper. Oil. Time. It hits him in layers, each one carrying something he cannot name yet, but somehow understands. Behind him, the door settles halfway open, leaving a thin strip of hallway light stretching across the floor like a line drawn between past and present. The rest of the room remains dim, but not entirely dark. There is light here, faint and amber, coming from somewhere ahead. Ranger stops about 10 feet in, ears forward, body still. Daniel follows his gaze, and then he sees it. A small table, centered against the far wall. On it, a single candle, long burned down, but somehow still holding a wick that glows faintly, as if it remembers fire. Around it, objects arranged with a kind of care that does not belong to storage. This is not a hidden room for things. This is a place for keeping something alive. Daniel's breath slows. He steps closer. His boots feel too loud, even though they barely make a sound. The walls around him are lined with shelves, each one holding pieces of a life that was never spoken about upstairs. Photographs, some curled at the edges, others pinned neatly in place. A folded flag, carefully pressed, its colors dim but unmistakable. A pair of old dog tags hanging from a nail, the chain swaying slightly, as if the air remembers movement. Ranger moves toward the table. His nose lowers, hovering just above the surface, not touching, just acknowledging. Then he sits, straight, still, the way he used to when Daniel would give a command that mattered. Daniel reaches for one of the photographs. His fingers hesitate before lifting it, like he is afraid the image might disappear if he moves too fast. It shows a young man in uniform, not a stranger, not quite familiar either. The resemblance is subtle but undeniable. The same set of the jaw, the same quiet in the eyes. Daniel's chest tightens. He sets the photo back down more gently than he expected he could. "That is my father," he says, though the room does not need to be told. His voice sounds different in here. Softer, like it belongs to someone younger. Ranger's ears flick at the sound, but he does not move. Daniel turns slowly, taking in more of the room. There is a map pinned to the far wall, edges worn, lines drawn in faded ink across places he has only heard about in brief, careful stories. Some names are circled, others crossed out. One, near the center, is underlined twice. The air near that wall feels colder. Daniel steps closer, drawn without understanding why. His fingers trace the edge of the paper, then pause over the underlined name. The ink has bled slightly into the fibers, as if it was written with a hand that did not want to forget. Behind him, Ranger lets out a low breath. Not a warning, not fear. Recognition. Daniel turns back toward the table. The candle flickers. Just once. No flame. No heat. Just a brief shift, like something unseen passing through the room. And for the first time since he stepped inside, Daniel feels it clearly. This place was not built to hide something. It was built to remember. And somehow, without anyone telling him how, he knows this is only the beginning of what it has been waiting to show him. Daniel does not move for a long time. The room breathes around him, quiet and steady, like it has waited years for someone to finally listen. His fingers hover again over the photograph, but this time he picks it up fully, holding it closer to the faint amber glow. The man in the image is younger than he expected. Early 30s, maybe. Clean uniform, shoulders squared, but there is something in the eyes that does not match the posture. Something tired. Something already carrying weight. Daniel exhales slowly, his breath barely visible in the cold air. "You never told me," he murmurs, though he is not sure if he is speaking to the room, to his grandmother, or to the man in the photo. Ranger shifts slightly beside the table, then stands, his nails making the softest tap against the concrete as he moves toward the shelves along the left wall. His nose trails just inches above the surface of the objects, pausing now and then, as if reading something written in scent instead of ink. Daniel watches. Him, a strange unease settling into his chest. This is not curiosity. This is guidance. He turns back to the table. Beneath the photograph, partially hidden by its frame, is a stack of envelopes tied together with a thin piece of faded twine. The paper is yellowed, edges curled, each one addressed in careful handwriting that feels deliberate, almost reverent. Daniel hesitates before touching them. His hand is steady, but something deeper is not. He slides the top envelope free. The name written across the front is not his. Not his grandmother's either. It is his father's full name, ranked beneath it. The kind of detail that makes it feel official, even though the envelope is not sealed with anything more than time. Daniel's throat tightens. He turns it over. No stamp. No mark of ever being sent. Just a letter that was written and then kept. Ranger lets out a soft sound behind him. Not quite a whine. More like a low breath pulled from somewhere deep in his chest. Daniel glances back. The dog is standing in front of another shelf now, staring at something Daniel cannot see from where he is. The same stillness. The same certainty. Daniel looks back down at the envelope. Slowly, carefully, he opens it. The paper inside unfolds with a faint crackle, like it remembers being folded for too long. The handwriting inside is smaller, tighter, as if whoever wrote it was trying to fit too much into too little space. Daniel begins to read. The first line stops him. It is not formal. It is not distant. It is personal, direct. It carries a weight that feels immediate, even after all these years. His breathing changes as his eyes move across the page. The words are not easy. They do not accuse. They do not explain everything either. They circle something. A moment. A decision. A place that is only described in fragments, as if naming it fully would make it too real. Daniel's grip on the paper tightens just slightly. His father's name appears again in the letter, not as a subject, but as someone who was there. Someone who was not supposed to be left behind. The sentence does not finish the way Daniel expects. It stops, mid-thought, like the writer could not bring themselves to complete it. Daniel lowers the paper slowly. The room feels colder now, but not empty. Heavy, like it is holding the rest of the story just out of reach. MIA, he says quietly, the term tasting different in his mouth now. Missing in action, the phrase he grew up hearing. The phrase that always felt like a clean ending, even if it was incomplete. Ranger steps closer again, his head brushing lightly against Daniel's arm, grounding him in a way nothing else in the room can. Daniel exhales, long and uneven. You were not missing, he whispers, eyes drifting back to the photograph. You were left. The words settle into the space, not loud, but undeniable. The candle flickers again, just once. Daniel looks toward it instinctively, and for a brief second, the faint glow seems stronger, warmer, like it is responding. He blinks, and it returns to its dim, steady state. Ranger turns his head toward the far corner of the room, ears lifting slightly. There is something else there. Something Daniel has not seen yet. The dog takes a few slow steps in that direction, then stops, looking back over his shoulder, waiting. Not asking, not urging, just waiting for Daniel to be ready. Daniel folds the letter carefully, more carefully than he has handled anything in years, and places it back on the table. His hands are no longer as steady. Not from fear, from understanding. The kind that does not arrive all at once, but piece by piece, each one heavier than the last. He takes a step toward Ranger, then another. The corner of the room is darker, the light from the hallway barely reaching it. But something is there. He can feel it now. Not hidden. Not exactly. Just not yet revealed. And as he moves closer, the air shifts again, carrying with it a faint scent he recognizes without knowing why. Leather. Old. Worn. Familiar in a way that reaches deeper than memory. Ranger sits in front of the spot, eyes fixed, posture straight. Waiting again. Always waiting. Daniel stops beside him, heart steady but heavy, and looks down at the floor where the scent seems strongest. The concrete is cracked there, just slightly, a thin line running across the surface like a seam that was never meant to be seen. And for the second time that night, Daniel understands something without needing it explained. The room is not finished with him yet. Daniel lowers himself, slowly to one knee, the cold of the concrete seeping through the fabric of his jeans, as if the ground itself is trying to anchor him in place. His hand hovers over the thin crack running across the floor, tracing it without touching, following its uneven path until it disappears beneath a faint layer of dust. Ranger remains perfectly still beside him, posture upright, eyes locked on the same line, as if the answer has always been there, waiting for someone to notice. Daniel exhales, steady but heavy, then presses his palm flat against the surface. The concrete is colder here, not just in temperature, but in feeling, like it has been separated from the rest of the room, sealed with intention. He taps it once with his knuckles. The sound that comes back is dull, but not solid. There is space beneath. He shifts his weight, brushing the dust aside with slow, deliberate movements, revealing more of the seam. It is not random. It forms a rough rectangle, about 3 feet long, just wide enough for something to be hidden underneath. "You have got to be kidding me," he whispers, though there is no disbelief in his voice, only a quiet acceptance that this night is no longer following any rules he understands. Ranger lowers his head slightly, ears tilting forward, watching Daniel's hands as if every motion matters. Daniel scans the edges of the seam, fingers searching for something that gives. For a moment, there is nothing, just cold stone and silence. Then his fingertips catch on a small indentation near the corner, barely noticeable unless you are looking for it. He presses. Nothing happens. He presses harder, shifting his grip, and then there is a faint click, so soft it almost disappears into the stillness of the room. The section of concrete lifts slightly, just enough to break the seal of years. Daniel pulls back instinctively, heart picking up, not from fear, but from the weight of what he is about to uncover. He glances at Ranger. The dog does not move, just watches. Steady, certain, like this moment was always going to happen. Daniel slides his fingers under the edge and lifts. The slab is heavier than it looks, but it gives, rising inch by inch until he can lean it aside. Beneath it, there is no darkness. There is something else. A wooden box, fitted perfectly into the space, its surface worn but intact, edges reinforced with metal that has dulled over time. It is not random storage. It is placed, deliberate, preserved. Daniel stares at it for a long second, his breath slowing again as the reality settles in. This is not just a hidden room. This is a place built to protect something that mattered too much to lose. He reaches down and brushes his hand across the lid. The wood is smoother than expected, as if it has been handled more than once before being sealed away. There is a faint engraving near the center, shallow but clear enough to read. A name. Not his. Not his father's either. Atlas. Daniel reads quietly, the word unfamiliar yet heavy, like it carries more than just letters. Ranger reacts instantly. His ears lift higher, his body leaning forward just slightly, a low breath escaping him that sounds almost like recognition. Daniel glances at him, something shifting in his chest. "You know this," he murmurs, not expecting an answer, but feeling one anyway. He lifts the lid. Slowly, the hinges move without resistance, almost too easily, as if time has not touched them the way it should have. Inside, the contents are arranged with the same careful intention as everything else in the room. A folded piece of fabric, a worn leather collar, and beneath them, another set of letters, thicker, tied with a darker cord. Daniel's eyes settle on the collar first. He picks it up gently, turning it in his hands. The leather is aged but strong, the edges softened by use, the buckle scratched but intact. There is a metal plate attached to it, small and simple. He tilts it toward the light. The name is the same. Atlas. Ranger steps closer, his nose brushing the edge of the collar, inhaling slowly, deeply, as if pulling something from it that Daniel cannot see. His posture changes, just slightly, the stillness giving way to something more personal. Not alertness, not tension, memory. Daniel watches him, a quiet realization forming, not fully shaped yet, but undeniable. This was not just any dog. And whatever story is buried in this room, it did not belong to his father alone. He sets the collar back into the box with care, then reaches for the bundle of letters beneath it. The cord resists slightly as he loosens it, the fibers stiff from years of being untouched. As it finally gives, the stack shifts in his hands, heavier than paper should feel. He does not open one right away. Instead, he sits there, the box open before him, Ranger beside him, the room holding its breath around them. Because for the first time since he walked into this house, Daniel understands something clearly. This is not about finding answers anymore. It is about being ready to carry them. Daniel does not open the letters right away. He just sits there, the wooden box resting between his knees, the weight of it settling into his hands like something alive. Ranger stays close, his shoulder pressed lightly against Daniel's arm, steady and warm in contrast to the cold that fills the room. For a moment, neither of them moves. It feels wrong to rush this. Like opening those pages too quickly might scatter something fragile that has been held together for decades. Daniel finally exhales, slow and controlled, and lifts the first letter from the stack. The paper is thicker than the ones on the table, the edges more carefully cut, the handwriting on the front more deliberate. There is no address this time. No rank. Just a name written in a style that feels personal, almost intimate. He turns it over. It has been opened before. Not sealed and forgotten like the others. Read. Folded. Kept. Daniel unfolds it carefully, smoothing the creases with his thumb as if the act itself requires respect. The ink inside is darker, less faded, like it was written later than the others. His eyes skim the first line, and something in his expression shifts. It is not shock. Not yet. It is recognition. The kind that comes before understanding fully catches up. The letter is not written by his grandmother. The voice is different. Shorter sentences. Cleaner lines. Less hesitation. It reads like someone trained to speak clearly, even when the truth is not easy to carry. Daniel's breathing slows as he continues. The words do not circle the story. They walk straight toward it. There is a mention of a mission. Not detailed. Not dramatic. Just enough to frame a moment where things changed. A location that is never fully named, only described by terrain and weather, like the writer wanted it to be remembered without being traced. Daniel's fingers tighten slightly. On the edge of the paper, Ranger shifts beside him, his head lifting, ears angling toward Daniel, as if he can feel the change before hearing it. The next lines land heavier. The writer speaks of a choice, not framed as right or wrong, just necessary. A decision made in a span of seconds that would echo for years. Daniel swallows, his throat dry, his eyes moving faster now, drawn forward by something he cannot stop. Then the name appears again. His father's. Not as someone lost, not as someone gone, but as someone who stayed behind when others could not. The sentence is clear. Too clear. There is no room for interpretation. No soft edges to hide behind. Daniel's chest tightens, a pressure building that feels unfamiliar, like something long buried is shifting under the surface. Stayed. He repeats quietly, the word barely leaving his lips. Ranger lets out a low breath, his body leaning closer, grounding him again. Daniel keeps reading. The letter does not excuse. It does not apologize in the way he expected. It acknowledges. It names the moment for what it was, without dressing it in language that makes it easier to accept. And then, at the bottom, there is a name. Not printed. Not formal. Just signed. A first name. One Daniel has never heard before. He lowers the letter slowly, staring at the signature as if it might change if he looks long enough. Who are you? He asks, not expecting an answer, but needing to say it out loud. Ranger stands, his movement quiet but deliberate, and turns toward the box again. His nose dips back inside, brushing lightly against the remaining letters, then pausing over one near the bottom. He nudges it gently, just enough for it to shift out of place. Daniel watches him, a strange certainty settling in. This is not random. It never has been. He reaches for the letter Ranger has chosen. It feels different in his hand. Lighter, thinner, more fragile. The paper inside is softer, worn in a way that suggests it has been handled many times. He opens it carefully. The handwriting inside is familiar now. Not from memory, but from feeling. This one is his grandmother's. The lines are longer, more careful, as if each word had to be earned before it was written. Daniel reads the first sentence, and his breath catches. It is not addressed to his father. It is not addressed to the man from the previous letter either. It is addressed to someone else entirely. To the one who stayed with him when no one else could. He reads softly. The room feels smaller now, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves are leaning in to listen. Ranger sits again, closer this time, his eyes fixed on Daniel, waiting. Always waiting. Daniel's hands tremble just slightly as he continues reading, the pieces beginning to connect in ways he is not sure he is ready to accept. Because this story is no longer just about what happened. It is about who was there when it did, and why they were never spoken about again. Daniel reads the line again, slower this time, as if the meaning might shift if he gives it enough space. To the one who stayed with him when no one else could. The words do not feel like ink anymore. They feel like weight, like something placed carefully into his hands after being carried alone for too long. His fingers tighten slightly on the paper, the edges pressing into his skin as if grounding him in the present. Ranger does not move. He watches, steady, his breathing calm, but there is something in his eyes now that Daniel cannot ignore. Not just attention, not just loyalty, recognition that runs deeper than training or instinct. Daniel swallows and continues reading. The handwriting grows more uneven as the letter goes on, not rushed, but heavy, as if each sentence had to pass through something painful before it could exist on the page. His grandmother writes about silence, about how some truths are not hidden because they are shameful, but because they are too complicated to explain without breaking something else. She writes about her son, not as a hero, not as a victim, but as a man who made a choice that no one should ever have to make. Daniel's breath falters slightly. He leans forward, elbows resting on his knees, the letter held closer now, as if proximity might help him understand faster. The next lines shift. They speak of someone else, not by name at first, just by presence. A companion, a witness, someone who did not leave when everyone else had to. Daniel's eyes move more slowly now, each word settling deeper than the last. His grandmother does not describe what happened in detail. She does not need to. The absence of description says enough. What she focuses on instead is what came after. The waiting, the not knowing, the years of carrying a version of the story that never felt complete. And then, one day, a letter. Not official, not stamped, just delivered. Daniel's chest tightens again. He knows what comes next before he reads it. The letter she received was from the same man whose name he saw moments ago. The one who wrote about the choice. The one who stayed. And with it came something else. Not just words. Proof. Daniel's hands begin to tremble now, just enough to make the paper shift slightly. Ranger leans closer, his side pressing more firmly against Daniel's leg, steadying him without a sound. Daniel keeps reading. His grandmother writes about the collar, about how it arrived wrapped in cloth, worn but intact, carrying the scent of a place she had never seen but somehow understood. She writes about the name engraved on it. Atlas. She writes about what it meant. Not just a dog, not just a companion, but a presence that stayed when fear would have driven anything else away. Daniel's eyes lift slowly from the page to the collar resting inside the box. The leather catches the faint light, quiet and unassuming, yet suddenly heavier than anything else in the room. He looks at Ranger. Really looks this time. The shape of his ears, the steadiness in his posture, the way he has not once questioned any of this. A thought forms. Not fully, not logically, but it is there, and it does not leave. Daniel looks back down at the letter. The final lines are softer. Not weaker, just different. His grandmother writes about why she never spoke of this. Not because she wanted to forget, but because she did not know how to explain a truth that felt too large for words. How do you tell a child that their father was not lost, but left behind for a reason that was both right and unbearable? How do you explain that someone stayed with him when no one else could, and that someone was never meant to be forgotten, but was never meant to be understood either? Daniel exhales slowly, the air leaving him heavier than when it entered. The letter ends without a signature, just a small line beneath the final sentence, as if even her name felt unnecessary after everything she had said. He lowers the paper carefully, placing it beside the others in the box. His hands rest there for a moment, unmoving. Then he reaches for the collar again. This time, he does not just look at it. He holds it. The leather bends slightly under his grip, warm now from his touch, as if it is responding. Ranger shifts closer, his nose brushing Daniel's wrist, then the collar, then back again. A quiet loop, a connection that does not need to be explained. Daniel's voice is barely a whisper when he speaks. You were not alone. The words are not directed at anyone in the room. Not entirely. They settle into the space anyway, filling something that has been empty for a very long time. The candle flickers once more, a little stronger this time, casting a brief glow that reaches farther than before. Daniel notices it. He does not question it. He just sits there, the collar in his hands, the letters open beside him, and the weight of a story that is no longer hidden beginning to settle into something he can finally begin to carry. Daniel does not realize he is crying at first. The tears come quietly, slipping down without urgency, without sound, like something that has been waiting for permission rather than release. He does not wipe them away. He just sits there on the cold floor, the collar resting in his hands, the letters open beside him, and for the first time in years, he does not try to hold anything back. Ranger shifts closer, his body pressing gently against Daniel's side, steady and present, the warmth of him cutting through the chill of the room. There is no urgency in the moment, no rush to fix anything, Just the quiet acceptance that something inside Daniel has finally begun to move. He exhales slowly, his breath uneven, and lowers his head for a moment, eyes closing as if the weight of everything needs somewhere to settle. I thought I understood, he murmurs, his voice rough but soft, like it belongs to someone younger than the man sitting here now. I thought I knew what happened. The room does not answer. It does not need to. The truth is already here, laid out in pieces that no longer contradict each other. His father was not abandoned in the way Daniel always imagined. Not forgotten. Not erased. He was part of a moment that could not be explained without breaking something deeper. And he was not alone in it. Daniel lifts his head again, his gaze drifting toward Ranger. The dog is watching him, calm, steady, as if none of this is surprising. As if he has known all along that this night would come. Daniel studies him now, not as a companion, not just as a dog, but as something else entirely. The way he found the wall, the way he led him here, the way he reacted to the name carved into the collar. It does not feel like coincidence anymore. It feels like something carried forward, not in memory, not in explanation, but in presence. Daniel reaches out slowly, his hand moving to rest against Ranger's neck, fingers pressing into the thick fur, grounding himself in something real. Ranger leans into the touch without hesitation, his eyes softening, his posture relaxing just slightly, but his attention never leaving Daniel. Atlas, Daniel says quietly, the name settling differently now, no longer unfamiliar. Ranger's ears flick at the sound, just once, a subtle reaction that Daniel would have missed any other day. But not tonight. Tonight, every small detail matters. Daniel exhales again, steadier this time. He looks back down at the box, at the letters, at the pieces of a story that has finally found its way to him. For so long, he carried a version of the past that felt incomplete, like a sentence that ended too early. Now, the rest of it is here. Not clean, not easy, but whole. And somehow, that changes everything. He reaches into the box once more, not for another letter, but for the folded fabric beneath them. He lifts it carefully, unfolding it with slow, deliberate movements. It is a flag, smaller than the one on the shelf, more worn, the edges softened by time. He runs his fingers across it, the texture familiar in a way that pulls something deep from his chest. This was not just kept. It was carried. Ranger lowers himself to the ground beside him, his body settling into a quiet rest, but his head remains lifted, eyes still watching, always watching. Daniel places the flag gently beside the collar, arranging them together without thinking, as if they belong in the same space. The candle flickers again, longer this time, the faint glow stretching across the table and brushing against the objects laid out before him. It is not bright, not dramatic, but it is enough. Enough to see clearly, enough to understand. Daniel sits back slightly, his hands resting on his knees now, his breathing calm again, though something inside him has shifted permanently. The anger he carried for years does not disappear. It does not vanish in some sudden moment of clarity, but it changes. It softens at the edges, no longer sharp enough to cut through everything else. Because now, there is something else beside it. Context, truth, and something he did not expect to feel tonight. Peace. He looks at Ranger one more time, his voice barely above a whisper. You brought me here. Ranger does not react with movement. He does not need to. The stillness itself is the answer. And in that silence, Daniel understands something that does not need to be explained. Some things are not found. They are led back to you when you are finally ready to see them. The room grows quieter, not because the sounds disappear, but because Daniel no longer hears them the same way. The faint creak of the house above, the distant whisper of wind against old wood, even the soft rhythm of Ranger's breathing beside him all settle into something steady, something grounding. He does not feel lost anymore. Not in this space. Not in this story. Daniel leans forward again, his movements slower now, more intentional, as if every action carries meaning. He gathers the letters carefully, stacking them in the same order he found them, smoothing each page with his palm before placing them back into the wooden box. There is no urgency in his hands anymore. No tension, just respect. Ranger watches him, head slightly lowered, eyes calm, as if the work they came here to do is almost complete. Daniel picks up the collar one more time. The leather feels different now. Not just old, not just worn. It feels known. like something that has passed through time without losing its purpose. He turns it over gently, his thumb brushing across the engraved name. Atlas. The word no longer feels foreign. It feels anchored, real. He glances at Ranger again, a quiet understanding settling deeper in his chest. Not something he can prove, not something he needs to. Some truths are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be accepted. Daniel sets the collar back into the box, placing it beside the folded flag with care, aligning them as if they belong together, because now he knows they do. He lowers the lid slowly, the soft sound of wood meeting wood echoing gently in the room, not as an ending, but as a moment of closure that does not erase what came before. For a second, he keeps his hand resting on top of the box, fingers spread lightly across the surface, feeling the quiet beneath it, the history, the weight, the peace. Then he exhales, long and steady, and shifts his gaze toward the small table again. The candle flickers once more, the glow stretching a little farther this time, touching the edges of the photographs, the folded flag on the shelf, the dog tags hanging motionless against the wall. Daniel rises slowly to his feet, joints stiff from the cold floor, but his posture different now. Lighter, somehow, even with everything he has just learned. Ranger stands with him, immediately at his side, his presence constant, unshaken. Daniel takes a step toward the table, then another, his eyes moving across the room one last time, not searching anymore, just seeing. He pauses in front of the photograph of his father, reaching out to straighten it slightly where it has tilted. His fingers linger there for a moment, resting lightly against the frame. I get it now, he says quietly, his voice steady, not breaking, not heavy, just clear. The words do not feel forced. They do not feel like something he is trying to convince himself of. They feel true. Ranger shifts his weight beside him, his head lifting slightly, as if acknowledging something that does not need to be spoken. Daniel steps back, his eyes moving once more across the room, taking in every detail, every object, every piece of a story that no longer feels hidden. Then he turns toward the door. The strip of light from the hallway still cuts across the floor, unchanged, waiting. He walks toward it, Ranger moving in quiet step beside him, their pace slow but certain. As he reaches the threshold, Daniel pauses for just a second, glancing back over his shoulder. The room remains as it was, still, quiet, holding everything it has always held. But it does not feel heavy anymore. It feels complete. Daniel steps through the doorway, the warmth of the house meeting him again, subtle but real, and for the first time since he arrived, it does not feel empty. Ranger follows, his shoulder brushing lightly against Daniel's leg as they cross back into the hallway together. Behind them, the door remains slightly open, the faint glow of the candle still visible within, not fading, not disappearing, just steady. And Daniel does not close it. Not this time. Morning does not arrive all at once. It slips in quietly, first as a faint gray light pressing against the edges of the curtains, then as a soft glow that slowly begins to fill the house with something warmer than it has felt in years. Daniel is already awake when it happens. He is sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee untouched in front of him, his hands resting loosely around it, as if he forgot it was there. The house is still, not empty, just still. Ranger lies a few feet away, stretched out on the floor, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. His presence as constant in the daylight as it was in the dark. Daniel watches the light change across the room, the way it touches the walls, the old cabinets, the worn edges of the table. And for the first time since he stepped back into this house, it does not feel like a place he needs to leave behind. It feels like something he understands. He exhales softly, his gaze drifting toward the hallway. The door at the end remains slightly open, just as he left it. From where he sits, he cannot see inside, but he does not need to. He knows what is there now. And more importantly, he knows why. Ranger lifts his head slightly, as if sensing the shift in Daniel's attention, his ears flicking once before settling again. Daniel looks at him, a faint smile forming, small but real. "You knew I would stay," he says quietly. Ranger does not move, but his tail gives a slow, single tap against the floor, the sound soft but certain. Daniel leans back slightly in his chair, his fingers finally tightening around the mug, though he still does not drink. His mind is not racing. It is not searching for answers anymore. It is quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something heavy has been set down, not forgotten, but no longer carried alone. He glances toward the window as the sunlight strengthens, casting longer lines across the floor, warming the space inch by inch. Outside, the world continues as it always has. Cars pass. A distant door closes. Somewhere, faintly, he can hear someone laughing. Life moving forward, unaware of what shifted inside these walls overnight. Daniel stands slowly, the chair scraping lightly against the floor, and walks toward the hallway. Ranger rises immediately, falling into step beside him without hesitation, their movements unspoken but aligned. They stop in front of the door. Daniel does not open it wider. He does not need to step inside again. Not right now. Instead, he rests his hand against the frame, fingers brushing the worn wood, grounding himself in the reality of it. I am not selling it, he says quietly, the decision settling into place without resistance. The words feel right the moment they leave him. Not dramatic, not forced, just true. Ranger shifts slightly, leaning closer, his shoulder pressing against Daniel's leg, a quiet acknowledgement that needs no explanation. Daniel nods once, more to himself than anything else, then steps back. He turns away from the door, walking back toward the living room, his pace steady, his posture different than it was the night before. Not lighter in the sense of forgetting, but stronger in the way of understanding. Ranger follows, as he always does, close but not crowding, present without asking anything in return. Daniel pauses by the window, looking out at the morning that has fully arrived now, the light clear and steady, no longer hesitant. He rests his hand against the glass for a moment, feeling the faint chill of it, then lets it fall back to his side. Some things were never meant to be buried, he says softly, his voice calm, almost reflective. Just wait it on. Ranger sits beside him, his gaze following Daniel's out the window, both of them still for a moment that feels complete in a way Daniel cannot fully explain. The house does not feel like a memory anymore. It feels like a beginning. Not loud, not overwhelming, just present. And as the sunlight continues to spread across the floor, reaching farther into every corner, Daniel does not look away. Because for the first time in a long time, there is nothing left in this place that he is afraid to see.